Why did you stop? I am asking you directly, you who are listening to me now. Why did you stop? You heard the law, you understood it. You took your desire, you held it in imagination, you felt it real, perhaps for one night, perhaps for several nights, perhaps even for a few glorious weeks, and then you stopped. You abandoned the very thing you claimed you wanted most. And now you sit here, months later, perhaps years later, still wanting it, still aching for it, still carrying the hollow weight of it in your chest, and you have convinced yourself that it did not work. But I ask you again, and I want you to feel the weight of this question settle into you like a stone dropped into still water. Why did you stop? You did not fail. You quit. There is a vast and critical difference between the two, and until you understand that difference deep in the marrow of your being, you will repeat this cycle for the rest of your life. You will hear a teaching, you will try it for a few days, you will look at your world and see no evidence of change, and you will walk away shaking your head, saying it was all fantasy, all wishful thinking, all nonsense spun by dreamers and fools. And then 6 months later the ache returns because the desire never left you. It cannot leave you. It was planted in you by imagination itself, and imagination does not plant desires it cannot fulfill. Every hunger of the heart is a prophecy. Every longing is a promise. And when you abandoned your assumption, you did not destroy the promise. You simply delayed its fulfillment, and you added another layer of suffering to a life that was never meant to suffer at all. I tell you from my own experience, every desire that has ever burned in your heart was placed there because it is already yours in the deeper reality. It exists now, complete, finished, actual, in the fourth dimension of your being. It is as real as the chair you are sitting in, more real, because the chair will one day decay and be forgotten, but the reality of your fulfilled desire exists in eternity. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you will persist long enough for it to crystallize into this world of shadow and form. And most of you, I say this with love, but also with the firm authority of one who has witnessed it thousands of times across decades of teaching, most of you will not persist. Not because you cannot, not because the law does not work, not because you are unworthy or undeserving or somehow excluded from the operation of this principle, but because you have been trained by a world of appearances to trust only what your senses report, and your senses are always, without exception, reporting yesterday's assumptions. So tonight, I am not going to give you a new technique. I am not going to introduce some clever method you have never heard, some secret shortcut that will bypass the work of persistence. I am going to tell you the truth about what happens in the gap, that sacred and terrifying space between the moment you assume the wish fulfilled and the moment it crystallizes in your outer world. Because it is in that gap that every dream is either born or buried, and you, my friend, have been burying yours, but not tonight. Tonight you stop burying. Tonight you begin again. Let me tell you what I promise you if you stay with me through this hour. You will understand why doubt appears, not as your enemy, but as the very friction that polishes your assumption into diamond hardness. You will understand the 3 distinct phases through which every assumption must pass before it hardens into fact. You will understand why the world seems to resist you most fiercely at the exact moment your assumption is closest to crystallizing. And you will leave here tonight with a practice, a simple daily practice that will carry you through the gap without losing your footing. More than that, you will understand yourself. You will understand why you stopped. And you will understand why you never need to stop again. I am Neville, and I have taught this law for decades, not from theory, not from books I read in some library, not from the speculations of philosophers or the systems of theologians, but from the living, breathing, tested experience of my own consciousness. I discovered through my own trials and my own failures and my own stubborn, sometimes desperate persistence, that consciousness is the only reality there is or ever was or ever will be. That the world you see around you, every person, every circumstance, every condition, every seemingly immovable obstacle is nothing more than your own consciousness pushed out, hardened into form by the assumptions you have held long enough for them to take root. I did not come to this understanding easily. There were years when I assumed and saw nothing change. There were months when I doubted everything I had been taught by my teacher, Abdullah. There were dark nights when I lay in bed, holding the feeling of the wish fulfilled with every fiber of my being, and the next morning woke to find the same barren, indifferent world staring back at me as though I had done nothing at all. But I persisted, not because I was stronger than you, not because I had some gift you lack, not because I was made of different clay, but because I understood something that most people never grasp, something that most people are never told. I understood that the delay between assumption and crystallization is not a sign that the law has failed. It is the law working. The delay is the process. The gap is the gestation, and the gestation is sacred. And so I say to you now, the most important thing you will ever learn about the law of assumption is not how to assume. That is simple. A child can do it. A child does it every day without instruction. The most important thing is how to persist in your assumption when every fact in your world is screaming that it is not true, when every voice of reason and common sense tells you to give up, when the very people you love look at you with concern and say, "Be realistic." That is where the teaching lives. That is where the power is. And that is what I will give you tonight. Now, let me lay the foundation for everything that follows, because if you do not understand the nature of this gap, this interval between assuming and seeing, you will always be at the mercy of appearances, tossed about by every wind of circumstance, abandoning your assumptions at the first sign of contradiction. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are not engaging in fantasy. You are not pretending. You are not playing a game with your own mind to trick yourself into feeling better about a situation that has not changed. You are performing the most creative act available to a human being. You are occupying a state of consciousness, and the state you occupy determines the world you see. Let me say that again, because your mind will try to slide past it as though it were merely a pleasant idea rather than the most radical truth ever uttered. The state you occupy determines the world you see, not the other way around. Not ever the other way around. The world does not determine your state. Your state determines your world. This is the fundamental inversion, the great reversal, that separates those who use the law successfully from those who abandon it after a week. Most people live their entire lives in reaction. Something happens in their world and they respond. They feel good when circumstances are favorable. They feel bad when circumstances are unfavorable. They are thermometers, reading the temperature of the room and adjusting accordingly. But I am asking you to be a thermostat. I am asking you to set the temperature. I am asking you to determine the climate of your own experience by choosing your state of consciousness deliberately, and then holding it, persisting in it, regardless of what the thermometer says. When you assume a new state, when you feel yourself to be the person who already has what you desire, you have, in that moment, planted a seed in the soil of your own deeper consciousness. That seed is real. It is alive. It has its own intelligence, its own trajectory, its own appointed hour of emergence. But like every seed ever planted in the history of creation, it requires a period of darkness. It requires a period in which nothing visible is happening above the surface. The farmer who plants corn in April does not dig up the seed on the 5th day to check if it is growing. He does not stand over the soil with his hands on his hips, demanding that the stalk appear by Thursday. He trusts the process. He trusts the soil. He trusts the law of growth that governs all living things. He waters, he waits, and he knows. But you, when you plant your assumption in consciousness, you dig it up every morning. You dig it up by opening your eyes and immediately scanning your world for evidence. Where is it? Why has nothing changed? Did I do it wrong? Was I not feeling it deeply enough? Should I try a different scene? Should I add more detail? Should I repeat the act more times? And every time you dig up that seed, every time you leave the state of the wish fulfilled and return to the state of seeking, of checking, of waiting for proof, you interrupt the very process by which your assumption was becoming a living fact. I tell you, the gap between assumption and its crystallization in your world is not empty. It is full. It is teeming with invisible activity. The bridge of incidents is being constructed. People you have never met are being moved into position. Circumstances you could not have planned are being arranged with a precision that would stagger you if you could see it. Doors you did not know existed are being unlocked. Conversations you will not have for weeks or months are being seeded in the minds of strangers. But all of this is happening beneath the surface, in the fourth dimension of reality, the dimension of imagination, the dimension of cause. And your physical world, this three-dimensional stage of effects, is always, always, always the last to know. So when you assume and then see no change, you are not seeing evidence that the law has failed. You are seeing the natural, inevitable delay inherent in the process by which cause becomes effect. You are seeing the time it takes for the unseen to become seen, for the imagined to become actual, for the spiritual to clothe itself in material form. And if you understood this truly, if you let it sink below the level of intellectual agreement and into the bedrock of your being, you would never again be troubled by the gap. You would rest in it, you would trust it, you would even welcome it as the evidence, the only evidence you need, that the process is working exactly as it should. Now, before I go further into the depths of this teaching, I want you to consider something that may surprise you. Think about the last time you truly persisted in anything in your life. Perhaps it was learning to drive an automobile. Do you remember the first week behind the wheel? The awkwardness, the fear, the absolute certainty that you would never be able to do this complex thing that other people seem to do without thinking. And yet you persisted, day after day, and one morning you drove to work and realized you had not thought about driving at all. The skill had crystallized. It had passed from conscious effort to unconscious competence, not because you wished it into being, but because you persisted through the gap between not knowing and knowing, between awkwardness and mastery. Or perhaps it was a relationship. Perhaps there was someone in your life who did not immediately warm to you, and you persisted, not with force, not with manipulation, but with the quiet, steady assumption that the relationship would deepen. And it did, not on your timeline, not according to your plan, but it did, because persistence in an assumption is the one force in this universe that the world cannot resist indefinitely. That is faith, that is persistence. And that is exactly what the law of assumption requires of you, nothing more, nothing less, simply persist, and the world must yield. Now let us turn to the heart of what I wish to share with you tonight, and it is this, the nature of doubt itself. What is doubt? Where does it come from? And why does it appear with such savage ferocity at the very moment you begin to assume a new state? Most people believe that doubt is a sign of failure. They believe that if they were truly living in the end, if they were truly occupying the state of the wish fulfilled with complete conviction, they would feel no doubt at all. They would be serene and confident and unshakable in their assumption from the very first moment, like a monk on a mountaintop, untouched by the storms below. And when doubt appears, as it always does, as it must always do, they take it as proof that they are doing something wrong, that they have not assumed correctly, that there is some flaw in their technique, that the law is not working for them, that perhaps they are the one person in all of creation for whom this law does not apply. But I tell you, doubt is not a sign of failure. Doubt is a sign of transition. Doubt is the friction that arises when you attempt to move from one state of consciousness to another. It is the old state resisting its own death. It is the former assumption fighting to maintain its grip on your consciousness. And it is as natural and as inevitable as the pain a snake feels when shedding its skin. The snake does not conclude that something has gone wrong when the old skin tears and pulls. It does not rush to the doctor. It does not seek a new method of shedding. It simply endures the discomfort and emerges, glistening and new, on the other side. Think of it this way. You have been occupying a certain state of consciousness for months, perhaps years, perhaps your entire life. You have been the person who lacks this thing, who needs this thing, who wants this thing but does not have it. That state has become familiar to you. It has become comfortable, not because it is pleasant, for it is often deeply unpleasant, but because it is known. It is predictable. It is yours. And the mind, I tell you, will choose the familiar over the pleasant every single time, unless you consciously, deliberately, persistently override it. When you assume a new state, when you begin to feel yourself as the person who already has what you desire, you are attempting to kill the old state. You are attempting to vacate a home you have lived in for years, to walk out the door and never return. And the old state does not want to die. No state wants to die. It screams, it protests. It sends doubt rushing through your mind like water through a broken dam. It whispers to you in the quiet moments before sleep, in the vulnerable hours of early morning, in the middle of the afternoon when your defenses are low. It whispers, who are you fooling? Look at your bank account. Look at your body. Look at your circumstances. Look at the cold, hard evidence spread out before you like a prosecutor's case. This is fantasy. You are deluding yourself. Go back to what you know. Go back to what is safe. Go back to what is real. That voice is not your voice. I want you to hear me clearly on this point because it is one of the most important things I will ever tell you. That voice of doubt is not your voice. It is the voice of the state you are leaving. It is the death cry of an identity that is being replaced, and the louder it screams, the closer you are to leaving it behind. The intensity of the doubt is directly proportional to the proximity of the breakthrough. I had a student once, a woman named Margaret, who came to my lectures in New York for several months. She had been assuming a new state for 6 weeks. She wanted to be married. She was 43 years old and had never been married, and she had begun to accept, somewhere deep in the marrow of her being, that she never would be. But she heard my teaching, and something in her awakened. She began assuming the feeling of being a wife. Every night she fell asleep feeling the ring on her finger, hearing the breathing of her husband beside her, feeling the weight and warmth of another body in the bed. She did this faithfully for 6 weeks, and for 6 weeks nothing happened. No man appeared, no invitation to dinner, no chance encounter on the street, nothing moved, nothing changed. The world was as silent and indifferent as stone. And then, in the 7th week, the doubt hit her like a physical blow. She told me she could barely get through her days. Every thought was poisoned with the conviction that she was fooling herself. She said she felt ridiculous, a 43-year-old woman lying in bed pretending to be married. She said she was embarrassed to even continue the imaginal act. She wanted to quit. She was ready to quit. She had already half quit in her heart. I told her, Margaret, you are closer now than you have ever been. The doubt you feel is the death rattle of your old state. It is fighting for its life because it can feel itself being replaced by something stronger, something truer, something more alive. Do not negotiate with it. Do not argue with it. Do not try to convince it that you are right and it is wrong. Simply persist. Go to sleep tonight in exactly the way you have been going to sleep for 6 weeks. Change nothing, add nothing, subtract nothing, simply persist. She persisted. 3 weeks later, she met a man at a gathering she almost did not attend because the doubt had told her there was no point in going. Within 4 months, she was married. The very force that almost made her quit, the doubt that seemed so overwhelming, so rational, so final, was the signal that her assumption was crystallizing, but she could not see that. She could not know that. Because the crystallization of assumption happens beneath the surface, invisible to the senses, and the doubt that arises is simply the turbulence created by 2 states of consciousness colliding, the old state and the new, fighting for dominion over her experience. You must understand this with your whole being. Doubt is not evidence that the law is not working. Doubt is evidence that the law is working so powerfully that your old state can feel itself being displaced. And what you do with that doubt, how you respond to it in the critical moment of its arrival, determines everything. It determines whether you become Margaret the wife or Margaret the woman who almost was. Here is what you must not do. You must not fight the doubt. You must not try to push it away with force or argue with it using logic or replace it with cheerful affirmations and forced optimism. That is not what I teach. I have never taught that and I never will. I do not teach you to think pleasant thoughts until reality cooperates. I teach you to assume differently. There is a world of difference between the two, and confusing them has led more people astray than almost any other error in this work. Forced optimism is the conscious mind trying to override reality with willpower. It is exhausting. It is brittle. It breaks at the first challenge. Assumption is something else entirely. Assumption is consciousness occupying a new state, settling into it, resting in it, becoming it, until that state is the only reality the deeper mind knows. So when doubt comes, and it will come, let it pass through you like wind through an open window. Do not close the window. Do not board it up. Do not try to build a wall against the wind. Let it blow, feel it, acknowledge it, And then, when it has passed, and it always passes, return to your assumption. Return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Return to the state you have chosen to occupy. That is persistence, not the absence of doubt, never the absence of doubt, but the decision, made again and again and again, to return to your assumption after doubt has visited you and found you unshakable. Now I want to pause here and tell you something that will sharpen everything I have said so far, something that connects the nature of doubt to the deeper mechanics of how assumption becomes fact. Because what I am about to share will change the way you understand the entire process. Every assumption you hold in consciousness passes through 3 distinct phases before it crystallizes in your world. I call these phases planting, germination, and harvest, and each phase has its own character, its own challenges, its own particular form of doubt, and its own particular temptation to quit. The first phase is planting. This is the moment you first assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is the night you first lie down in your bed, close your eyes, enter the state akin to sleep, and feel yourself to be the person you intend to become. You feel the ring on your finger. You feel the letter of acceptance in your hands. You feel the handshake of the business partner. You hear the words of congratulation. You smell the air of the new city. You feel the warmth of the home you desire. In this phase, everything feels exciting and electric. Everything feels possible. You are thrilled by the discovery or the rediscovery of this magnificent law. You feel the power of your own imagination for the first time in perhaps years, and it intoxicates you. You think, why did I ever doubt this? Why did I ever stop believing? This is the most natural, the most obvious, the most self-evident truth I have ever encountered. There is very little doubt in this phase, because the novelty and the vividness of the experience carry you forward on their own momentum. But the planting phase is also the most dangerous phase, because it is here that most people make a critical and usually fatal error. They plant the seed, and then they immediately begin watching for the harvest. They assume tonight, and tomorrow morning they look out the window for results. They assume for 3 nights running, and by the 4th day they are scanning their world with the desperate, hungry eyes of someone looking for proof, for confirmation, for any scrap of evidence that the law is working. They look at their phone expecting the call. They check their email expecting the offer. They watch the faces of strangers for some sign, some signal, some acknowledgement that reality has begun to shift. And that very act of looking for proof is the act of leaving the state of the wish fulfilled. The moment you begin to search for evidence, you have exited the state of having and returned to the state of wanting. You have moved from the consciousness of fulfillment to the consciousness of lack. You have, in that moment, dug up the seed, and the seed, disturbed before it could send down even the most fragile root, is destroyed, not by the law, not by some cosmic punishment, but by your own impatience. The second phase is germination, and this is where the real test of your persistence begins. In this phase, you have been assuming for days, perhaps weeks. The initial excitement has faded like the flush of new love. The novelty is gone. The practice has become routine, and routine, for most people, is the grave of inspiration. You are left with the quiet, unglamorous, repetitive work of simply persisting. Night after night, you return to the same imaginal act, the same scene, the same feeling. Morning after morning, you wake to the same unchanged world, the same job, the same apartment, the same bank balance, the same face in the mirror. And it is in this phase that doubt arrives in its most powerful and most seductive form. During germination, the doubt does not come as a dramatic crisis. It does not announce itself with trumpets and thunder. It comes as a quiet, reasonable question, spoken in the calm voice of common sense. Is this really working? Maybe I should try a different approach. Maybe I need a different technique. Maybe the scene I chose is wrong. Maybe I should read another book, listen to another teacher, find another method, attend another lecture. Maybe the problem is not persistence but technique. Maybe if I just found the right way to do this, it would work faster. The doubt in this phase disguises itself as wisdom. It disguises itself as discernment. It disguises itself as the voice of mature, responsible thinking. It tells you that you are being intelligent by questioning, that you are being rational by doubting, that only a fool Only a naive and credulous fool would continue to assume something that shows no visible sign of becoming true after all these weeks. But I tell you, the doubt of the germination phase is the most dangerous doubt of all, precisely because it sounds so reasonable. It does not feel like fear, it feels like common sense. And common sense, I assure you, is the sworn enemy of imagination. Common sense is nothing more than the collective agreement of those who have never dared to assume beyond what their senses report. Common sense is the voice of the old state, wearing the respectable clothing of reason and rationality. During germination, the bridge of incidents is being built. The unseen forces of your deeper consciousness are arranging the circumstances through which your assumption will enter your world. People are being moved, opportunities are being shaped, connections are being forged in rooms you have never entered, in conversations you have never heard, between people whose names you do not yet know. But you cannot see the bridge being built, because it is being constructed from the other end. You will only see it when you arrive at it, when the circumstances suddenly appear in your world and you think, how remarkable, how unexpected, how perfectly this has all come together. And until that moment, you must walk in faith, not faith in some distant deity, not faith in some impersonal cosmic force, but faith in the law of your own consciousness. Faith that what you have assumed in the feeling of the wish fulfilled must, by the very nature of consciousness itself, become fact. The third phase is harvest, and here is where the teaching becomes most surprising, most counterintuitive, and most important for those of you who are on the verge of quitting. Most people expect the harvest to arrive quietly and gently, like a package delivered to their doorstep by a smiling postman. They expect the world to simply rearrange itself politely, without disruption, without inconvenience, without disturbing any of the comfortable structures of their current life. But I tell you, the harvest often arrives through what appears to be crisis. The bridge of incidents does not always look like a smooth, pleasant road lined with flowers. Sometimes it looks like a disruption. Sometimes it looks like a loss. Sometimes it looks like the collapse of something you thought you needed. Sometimes it looks like the very opposite of what you assumed. And in that moment, if you do not understand the mechanics of the harvest, you will panic. You will conclude that the law has betrayed you, and you will abandon your assumption at the very moment it is crystallizing into form. I had another student, a man named Thomas, who assumed a promotion at his company. He was a diligent, capable man who had been overlooked for years, and he began to assume the state of the promoted man, the man with the corner office, the man with the larger salary, the man whose work was recognized and valued. He persisted in this assumption for 2 full months, and then, instead of receiving a promotion, he was let go from his position entirely. His department was restructured, and his name was on the list. He came to me devastated, and I could see the accusation in his eyes even before he spoke it. Neville, the law has failed me. I assumed the promotion, and instead I lost everything. I have been faithful. I have persisted, and the world has punished me for it. I told him, Thomas, do not judge the bridge of incidents by its appearance. You did not assume a specific promotion at a specific company. You assumed a state, the state of a man whose work is recognized, whose talents are rewarded, whose life is prosperous and expanding. The law has heard you. The law is rearranging your world to fulfill that assumption, but the world you are leaving may need to be dismantled before the world you have assumed can be built. Trust the process. Do not interpret. Do not judge. Simply persist. Within 6 weeks, Thomas was offered a position at a different company, a position far superior to anything he had been seeking through promotion at his old firm. The salary was nearly double. The work was more aligned with his deepest gifts. The location was in the very city he had secretly longed to move to for years, but had never dared to request. His assumption had crystallized perfectly, but the bridge of incidents had required the destruction of his old position to carry him to the new one. What he experienced as catastrophe was in fact the mechanism of his fulfillment. This is why you must not judge the process by appearances. The bridge of incidents is often invisible until you have crossed it. And what looks like failure in the middle of the journey is often the very means by which your assumption is being fulfilled. Dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then dare to trust the process by which it becomes fact, even when, especially when, the process looks nothing like what you expected. Now, before I share with you the practical methods by which you can persist through these 3 phases, I want to pause here and acknowledge what may be stirring in you right now. You may be thinking, Neville, I have heard all of this before. I know about persistence, I know about the bridge of incidents, I know about doubt, I have read your books, I have listened to your lectures, I have memorized your phrases, and yet I still struggle, I still quit. I still abandon my assumptions when the gap stretches out before me like a desert. What is wrong with me? Why can I not do what others seem to do so easily? Nothing is wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are not constitutionally incapable of persistence. You are simply untrained. You have spent your entire life, every single day of it, being trained by a world that teaches you to trust appearances above all else. You have been trained to believe only what you can see and touch and measure and prove. You have been trained to demand evidence before belief, to require proof before commitment, to insist on results before investment. And now I am asking you to reverse that entire training in a single stroke. I am asking you to believe before you see, to assume before you experience, to feel before you have, to know before you are shown. That is not easy. It is not supposed to be easy. It is the great work of consciousness, the labor of a lifetime compressed into the simple but demanding act of assumption and persistence. But it is simple. And simplicity, when practiced with persistence, is the most powerful force in the world. Not complexity, not cleverness, not technique. Simplicity and persistence. Those two together can move mountains and drain oceans and reshape the very fabric of your world. So let me give you now the practical tools, the daily disciplines by which you can persist through the gap between assumption and crystallization. These are not theories. These are practices. They require nothing from you but your willingness to do them, night after night, day after day, until the world yields. The first practice is what I call the nightly return. Every night, without exception, without negotiation, without taking a night off because you are tired or discouraged or simply not in the mood, you must return to your imaginal act. You must enter the state akin to sleep, that drowsy, receptive, borderline state in which the conscious mind relaxes its grip and the deeper consciousness is laid bare and impressionable. And in that state, you must feel the wish fulfilled. Not think about it from the outside. Not visualize it as a movie playing on a screen in front of you with you watching from your seat, but feel it from within, as though you are inside the experience, as though it is happening to you, as you, right now, in this very moment. Sleep as though the wish were fulfilled. Wake as though it is already so. This is not a suggestion. This is not one method among many that you might try. This is the law. The feeling with which you fall asleep is the instruction you give to your deeper consciousness. It is the seed you plant in the most fertile soil in all of creation, the soil of the subconscious mind in its most receptive state. And whatever you plant in that soil must, by the law of your own being, grow into form. So if you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you have planted the seed of its crystallization. But if you fall asleep in the feeling of doubt, in the feeling of worry, in the feeling of lack, in the feeling of I hope this works, you have planted the seed of continued deprivation. And the soil does not judge, it does not choose, it does not edit. It simply grows whatever is planted in it with absolute fidelity. So every night, no matter what happened during the day, no matter how loud the doubt was, no matter how discouraging the evidence appeared, no matter how many people told you to be realistic, you return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You do not argue with the day. You do not try to resolve the contradictions between your assumption and your experience. You simply return to the feeling as faithfully and as naturally as a river returns to the sea. That is persistence. That is the nightly return, and it is the single most important habit you will ever develop. The second practice is what I call the daily dismissal. During the day, when doubt arises, and it will arise, sometimes gently and sometimes with the force of a breaking wave, you must develop the habit of dismissing it without engaging it. Most people, when doubt appears, immediately enter into a long, exhausting conversation with it. They argue with it. They try to refute it with logic. They try to overpower it with affirmations. They try to reason their way out of it. But every moment you spend engaged with doubt is a moment you spend occupying the state of doubt, and the state you occupy determines the world you see. So when doubt arises, you say to yourself, simply and without drama, without clenching your fists or gritting your teeth, "That is not my state. I do not live there anymore. I have moved." And then you gently, quietly, without force or strain, return your attention to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You do not need to feel it as powerfully as you do in the state akin to sleep. You simply need to touch the feeling lightly, briefly, like touching a talisman in your pocket, and then go about your day. The light touch is enough. The brief remembrance is enough. The momentary return to the feeling, even for 3 seconds, is enough to keep the seed alive and growing in the soil of your consciousness. The third practice is revision, and this is one of the most powerful tools I have ever taught. Every evening, before you begin your nightly return, take a few minutes to revise any event of the day that contradicted your assumption. If someone said something that implied your desire was impossible, revise that conversation. Hear them saying something that confirms your assumption. If you received a piece of news that seemed to deny your desire, revise it. See yourself receiving news that supports it. If you felt a surge of doubt during the day that seemed to overwhelm you, revise that moment. See yourself feeling confident, serene, certain, unmoved. Revision is not denial. Revision is not pretending that unpleasant things did not happen. Revision is the conscious reshaping of your experience in accordance with the state you have chosen to occupy. It is the act of refusing to accept any experience as final, as permanent, as definitive, that contradicts the state of consciousness you are building. And it is one of the most powerful forms of persistence available to you, because it takes the very events that would weaken your assumption and transforms them into fuel for its crystallization. It turns the enemy's weapons into your own armor. The fourth practice is the most important of all, and it is the one that most people neglect entirely because it seems to contradict everything else I have said. It is the practice of resting. Yes, resting, letting go, being still. Most people, when they first learn the law, become frantic with effort. They assume morning, noon, and night. They repeat their imaginal act dozens of times a day. They clench their minds around their desire like a fist around a stone, squeezing tighter and tighter, afraid that if they relax their grip for even a moment, the desire will escape. And that very clenching, that very desperation, that very feverish effort is the feeling of wanting, the feeling of lack, the feeling of not having. And that feeling is the precise opposite of the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is relaxed. It is calm. It is settled. It is the feeling of having, and having is the most relaxed state in all of human experience. Think about something you already have, something you take so completely for granted that you never give it a second thought. Your name, for instance. You do not walk around all day affirming your name. You do not lie in bed at night desperately hoping that your name will still be your name tomorrow. You do not clench your fists and repeat your name 1,000 times to make it more real. You simply know it. You rest in it. It is settled. It is done. It is yours. It has always been yours. That is the feeling you must cultivate toward your desire. Not the frantic desperation of wanting, but the settled, peaceful assurance of having. And that assurance comes not from evidence, not from proof, not from the confirmation of your senses, but from the decision, the sovereign, irreversible decision to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled and to refuse to be moved from it, no matter what the world presents to your senses. Now I want to guide you into an experience right now as you listen to my voice. I want you to close your eyes if you can do so safely. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension in your jaw release. And I want you to think of the desire you abandoned, the one that still lives in you, the one you gave up on, the one you told yourself was impossible or foolish or too much to ask for, the one you buried but could not kill because it was planted in you by imagination itself, and imagination does not take back its gifts. Think of it now. Do not think of it as something you want. Do not think of it as something you lack. Do not think of it as something out there in the future, waiting to maybe possibly arrive if you are lucky enough or good enough or persistent enough. Think of it as something you already have, something that is already yours, something that is already done, finished, completed, settled, real. Where would you be right now if this desire were already fulfilled? What room would you be sitting in? What would you see when you look out the window? Who would be with you? What would you hear? What would you feel beneath your hands? What would the air smell like? What would be the expression on your face? Not the forced, hopeful smile of someone wishing, but the natural, easy, effortless expression of someone who has received what they knew deep in their bones was always coming. Go there now. Step into that scene as you would step into a warm room on a cold night. Feel your feet on the floor of that place. Feel the texture of what you are touching. Hear the sounds that belong to that fulfilled reality. Hear the voice of someone you love, someone who matters to you, speaking to you, congratulating you, celebrating with you, confirming what you already know to be true. Feel the warmth in your chest. Feel the settled calm in your belly. Feel the rightness of it, the completeness of it, the way everything in your world makes sense because this one thing is finally, at last, irrevocably true. Stay there. Breathe in that feeling. Let it fill your body. Let it reach into every corner of your being. This is not fantasy. This is not wishful thinking. This is the reality of the fourth dimension. This is the reality of imagination. This is the reality of cause. And what is real in imagination must, by the law of your own consciousness, become real in the world of form and flesh and time. Now, as you hold that feeling, say to yourself, silently, in the sanctuary of your own mind, where no one can hear and no one can judge, I will not stop. I will not abandon this. I am the one who persists. I am the one who does not quit. I am the one who sleeps in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and wakes knowing it is already so. I am the one whose assumptions crystallize. That is who I am. That is what I do. That is the law of my being. Let those words settle into you like seeds falling into rich soil. And when you open your eyes, carry that feeling with you, not as a burden, not as a task, not as something you must maintain through effort and strain, but as a quiet certainty, like the certainty of your own name. It is done. It is settled. You are simply waiting for the world to report what consciousness already knows. You are imagination, and imagination creates reality. Now, I know that some of you listening tonight have a question that has been building in you throughout this talk, and it is this. Neville, what if I have been persisting for months, genuinely persisting, doing the nightly return and the daily dismissal and the revision and the resting, and still my world looks exactly as it did when I started? What if nothing, absolutely nothing, has changed? What then? Am I doing something wrong? Is there something I am missing? This is the question that separates the student from the master, and I will answer it with the complete honesty you deserve. First, you must examine the quality of your assumption. Are you truly occupying the state of the wish fulfilled, or are you occupying the state of someone who is trying very hard to occupy the state of the wish fulfilled? These are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the difference between planting a seed and holding a picture of a seed. If you lie in bed at night and your inner monologue is, I am now going to do my imaginal act, I hope it works this time, I really need this to happen, please let this be the night it clicks, you are not in the state of the wish fulfilled. You are in the state of hoping. You are in the state of trying. You are in the state of performing a technique, and the law will faithfully produce the outer equivalent of that state, which is more hoping, more trying, more performing, and no result. The most important conversation you will ever have is the one you hold with yourself. And if that inner conversation is saturated with the tone of wanting, the law will faithfully give you more wanting. But if that conversation is saturated with the quiet, unforced certainty of having, the law will give you the having. So examine yourself. Be honest with yourself. Are you assuming or are you performing? Second, you must examine whether you are maintaining your assumption throughout the day or abandoning it the moment you open your eyes each morning. The nightly return is essential. It is the foundation of everything, but it is not sufficient if you spend your entire waking day contradicting your assumption with every thought, every word, every conversation, every reaction. If you assume health at night and spend your days discussing your symptoms, you are planting the seed at night and digging it up every morning. If you assume wealth at night and spend your days tallying your debts and complaining about prices, you are sowing and uprooting in an endless, futile cycle. The assumption must become your dwelling place, your permanent address, not a vacation home you visit for 10 minutes before sleep. Third, and this is the most subtle and most important point of all, you must examine whether you have truly released the how. Many people assume the end result beautifully, vividly, convincingly, but then immediately begin trying to figure out how it will happen. They scheme, they plan, they strategize. They try to identify the bridge of incidents before it appears. They try to construct the bridge themselves with their conscious minds. And that very effort to control the mechanism of fulfillment is the spirit of doubt disguised as productive action. When you try to figure out how your assumption will crystallize, you are telling your deeper consciousness that you do not trust it. You are saying, I believe in the end, but I do not believe you can find the way there, so let me help. And your deeper consciousness responds to that distrust by withholding the very bridge of incidents you are trying so desperately to build with your own hands. Man's imagination is the only redemptive power in the world. Trust it. It is infinitely more intelligent than your conscious mind. It sees paths you cannot see. It knows people you have not met. It has access to possibilities you have not imagined. Your job, your only job, is to assume the end and persist in that assumption. The way, the bridge, the how, the when, the through whom, that is the business of imagination itself. Release it. Let it go. And persist in the end, in the feeling of the fulfilled desire, and let imagination do what only imagination can do. Now, let me bring this full circle, because I opened tonight with a question, and a teaching that does not return to its beginning is a teaching that has lost its way. I asked you, why did you stop? And now, having walked with me through this hour, having understood the nature of the gap, the mechanics of doubt, the 3 phases of crystallization, the daily practices of persistence, I want you to ask yourself that question one final time. Not as an accusation, not with guilt or shame or regret, but with genuine curiosity and with the deep, hard-won knowledge you now possess. You stopped because you did not understand the gap. You stopped because you believed the delay between assuming and seeing meant failure, when in truth it meant gestation. You stopped because doubt arrived and you mistook it for the voice of truth, when in truth it was the death cry of your old state. You stopped because the germination phase felt like nothing was happening, and you could not see the bridge of incidents being built from the other side of your desire. You stopped because no one told you, or perhaps no one told you convincingly enough, that the very moment you most wanted to quit was the moment your assumption was closest to crystallizing into fact. But now you know, and knowing, truly knowing, changes everything, not because knowledge alone is power. That is only a half-truth, and half-truths are the most dangerous lies of all. Knowledge is potential power. It is a loaded weapon lying on a table. It can save your life or gather dust, depending entirely on whether you pick it up and use it. Applied knowledge, knowledge that you act upon, knowledge that you take into the state akin to sleep with you tonight, knowledge that you carry into tomorrow and the day after and the week after and the month after, that is actual power. That is the power that reshapes worlds, and the knowledge I have given you tonight is useless, completely and utterly useless, unless you apply it, unless you take it into your bed with you tonight, unless you return to the desire you abandoned, unless you reassume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, unless you persist when it is exciting and when it is boring, unless you persist when the doubt is quiet and when the doubt is screaming, unless you persist when the world confirms your assumption and when the world contradicts it with every fact at its disposal. Persist in your assumption and the world must rearrange itself to conform. That is not a hope. That is not a suggestion. That is not a theory waiting to be tested. That is the law. The world has no choice, none whatsoever, but to conform to the assumption you hold with unwavering persistence, because the world is nothing more than your own consciousness solidified, your own assumptions crystallized, your own imagination made flesh. Change your consciousness and the world must change. Hold that changed consciousness, persist in it, sleep in it, wake in it, live in it, and the world will rearrange every atom of its being to reflect what you have dared to assume. What you desire, you already are in eternity. The only distance between you and your fulfilled desire is the persistence required to make the eternal truth a temporal fact, and that persistence is not a punishment. It is not a test. It is not a burden placed upon you by a cruel or indifferent universe. It is a privilege. It is the sacred, joyful, creative work of consciousness becoming aware of its own power, of imagination clothing itself in the garments of time and space, of the dreamer waking inside the dream to discover that the dream was always, from the very beginning, his own creation. So I leave you tonight with this. Go back to the thing you abandoned. Go back to the desire you buried in the graveyard of failed attempts. Go back to the feeling you stopped feeling because you were afraid it would never become real, because the world told you it was foolish, because the doubt convinced you that you were not the kind of person for whom these things happen. And feel it again tonight. Feel it as you fall asleep. And tomorrow night, feel it again. And the night after that. And the night after that. And when doubt comes, and it will come, as surely as the wind comes to a hilltop, let it pass through you. Let it blow, and then return calmly, quietly, without drama, without fanfare, without negotiation, to your assumption. Not once, not twice, but as many times as necessary, for as long as necessary, until the world bows to the truth that you have dared to assume. I do not ask you to share this teaching with anyone. I do not ask you to tell others what you have heard tonight. I do not ask you to go out and convince anyone else that this law is true. That is not your work. Your work is singular, personal, intimate. I ask only that you apply it, test it, prove it in the laboratory of your own life, which is the only laboratory that matters. Take one desire, one single desire that matters to you deeply, that has been waiting for you patiently all the time you were busy doubting, and give it the persistence it deserves. Give it 30 days of faithful assumption. Give it 30 nights of sleeping in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Do not evaluate it on the 15th day. Do not check the score at halftime. Simply persist. And at the end of those 30 days, observe what has happened in your world. Observe the people who have appeared. Observe the circumstances that have shifted. Observe the doors that have opened. Observe the bridge of incidents that has carried you, step by step, toward the fulfillment of what you dared to assume. Not because I need the confirmation. I do not. I know this law as intimately as I know my own heartbeat. I have tested it and proved it in my own life more times than I can count, and I have watched it operate in the lives of thousands who have sat where you are sitting now, who have felt what you are feeling now, who have doubted as fiercely as you have doubted. But you need the confirmation. You need to discover, through the undeniable evidence of your own experience, that consciousness is the only reality, that imagination creates reality, and that persistence in the assumption of the wish fulfilled is the only power that has ever changed anything in this world or any other. Go now, return to your desire, return to the feeling, return to the state you abandoned when the gap seemed too wide and the doubt seemed too loud and the world seemed too stubborn. And this time, my friend, do not stop. This time, persist. This time, sleep as though the wish were fulfilled and wake as though it is already so. And watch, with wonder, with gratitude, with the quiet tears of someone who has finally come home, as the world rearranges itself to conform to the truth you have dared to assume. I am Neville, and I tell you, the only thing that ever stood between you and the life your heart desires was your willingness to persist, not your talent, not your education, not your worthiness, not the approval of any external authority, not the permission of any other human being. Only your persistence, only your refusal to quit, only your decision to return again and again and again to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And now that you know this, now that you understand the gap and the doubt and the three phases and the daily practice, you have no reason to stop, not ever again. So do not stop, persist. And the world, which has no choice, which has never had a choice, will say yes.